Hello and welcome back to Speed Demon Painting. Today we're taking a look at how to use your ships best on the open seas and how to make the most out of ships that have a weapon hardpoint in the aft. Now, every now and again you see a post popping up on either Discord or the Facebook group where there are players saying like, the weapon loadouts of my ships are rubbish, there's a weapon in the aft that is vastly inferior to just having two of them in the front. And while I do agree that weapons or ships that have all of the weapons mounted in the front are a lot easier to pilot, I do not agree with the fact that the ones that have weapons mounted in the aft are therefore useless. It just takes a bit of extra maneuvering to get the most out of them. In the last couple of years, quite a few wargames were simplified or streamlined, as the developers like to call it back then, to sort of give tanks and vehicles the ability to just turn on the spot and go into any direction that they want, face any direction, even just shoot clearly front-mounted weapons in 360-degree angles. That is not how Dystopian Wars works. I mean, any naval combat game that works in a way that you can just turn ships on a dime would be quite a rubbish one to play. So that means you have to put quite a bit of forethought into how you're going to be maneuvering your ships and what paths they can take, because these things can't just turn around when they are faced with opposition from an angle that they did not expect. And to show you what I mean by this, I have taken this picture of the battlefield that we are going to be using to show you how you can maneuver your ships around to make sure that you make the most out of those aft-facing weapons from your cruisers. Now, the type of cruisers that I'm referring to are things like, for instance, the Kutsov of the Commonwealth, or even the Norilsk. But you also have units like the Jiang, the Albion, or even the new Prydain Warrotor has some aft-mounted weapons. And you have to keep in mind that most of those have a 270-degree firing arc that overlaps in both the port and starboard side of your model. So ideally, you want to have your main targets in those arcs to shoot to. The main problem you have with this is that quite a few of those ships also have some fore-mounted weapons that can only shoot in the front arc, like for instance torpedo attacks or things like the Hokyangs from the Empire. So you do have to maneuver yourself into a position where you can fire in multiple arcs, and I'm going to try to show you this on this open seas map, where I have put a dotted line to show where the deployment zones are from the enemy and where I would deploy my aft equipped weapons, aft equipped ships I should say, on the battlefield. Now, for the sake of this video, let us assume that the three things I've put down here are Albions. Albions have two gun batteries, heavy gun batteries I should say, one in the front, one in the back, and they have those torpedoes aimed to the front, and ideally you would like to maneuver them into a position so that they're able to fire. Now, I almost never deploy one of these types of units directly into the middle of the board. I always try to keep them slightly on the side of that and then try to have them working their way towards the center of the board in an S type of maneuver, one that is going to take them there in multiple turns, because that's just the way you have to think in this game. You can't just take it one turn at a time, because they're ships, they don't maneuver that way. And so if I wanted to maneuver these in the first turn, what I would end up doing is moving them forwards a bit, and then, well, they usually have a turn limit of 4 or 5, meaning they can easily pull off a 90-degree angle if they want to. So they can actually start moving this way in the second part of that movement to get to where they want to be. Similarly with this one, you'd end up moving it forward slightly and then taking this turn, and similarly this one would start moving forward and then actually taking a turn as well. So you can you can start having two firing lanes where you can make most use of those weapons. And so this is what it ends up looking like after you've made those moves. The green firing arcs are pretty much what you can do with your torpedoes, and because torpedoes have extreme range, I tend to use my unit slightly off-centered, like I mentioned, so you can still cover about half of the board with your torpedoes. Now it does sort of depend on the layout, of course, of what the map looks like, but in this case, anything that can be found in sort of this zone is in deep trouble. Also, should any enemy units have advanced past this island, they are pretty much in range for your torpedoes. The only one that is slightly awkwardly placed, also for the side angle, is the one in the back here, so there is a good chance that you might want to allocate different attacks with this unit compared to the rest if line of sight is a bit of an issue. You quite often get that though in this game, when there's a bit of terrain and you have to do some tight maneuvering with units. Yeah, you tend to get in trouble that way. And the red firing arcs are pretty much the side arcs, so again this whole unit is covering quite a lot of the board where they can easily target anything, preferably in the firing arc of this last ship, because that means that all the other two should be able to also add their firepower to it, provided that there's no other targets in the way from enemy ships, of course, that you can't target because he's blocking them off with his own ships. But yeah, maneuvering him in this way gives you a fairly healthy amount of options to choose targets from, and in the next turn, the second one, you can actually start maneuvering further down the line in that S formation by going up here and then start making your turn this way, leveling everything out again, because when you do make that maneuver, they come up in a parallel again. There's quite a good chance that your opponent has advanced down the board as well, giving you more options to fire at him again. And so this is pretty much what it will look like once you've done that maneuver. It gets a bit messy, but it means that you still have some very strong forward firepower with your torpedoes, because remember, we're using Albions in this example, and well, if you look at it, virtually the entire board is in a either point blank or closing range for those heavy gun batteries that you've got, and it doesn't matter if your opponent advanced via the left flank or the right. By doing this sort of an S-shaped maneuver down the center of the line, by starting slightly off-center, you can find your ships in an absolutely glorious firing position for the next third and fourth round coming up. It also means that, well, it depends on what ship you used. In this case, I've said Albions because I'm taking into account the front firepower from the torpedoes. Had this been another typical aft-mounted ship, like for instance a Norilisk, you would be in a very good position, because those Norilisks come equipped with heavy broadsides, and so you've created a very strong center brawler unit that I always like to field. That's why I recommend them to beginning players, even if they are the ones that have aft-mounted weapons, because you really can make the most of them with this sort of S-maneuvering. Now, if you want to think ahead about what's going to happen in the third and fourth turn, well, it sort of depends on the situation. I'd be very happy to push these ships forward as well. Of course, I don't want to hit that bit of landmass over there, but if you move them slightly more forward, you sort of keep that good central strong position to just blow at anything in any direction, which is precisely what these types of ships excel at. Although you can also still start maneuvering your way back into a second S maneuver, where you end up starting here and then bending back like this. Same with your ships, so you're relaying your firing arcs to again be your side arcs facing his deployment and the other side arcs facing your own deployment zone, depending on where your opponent tries to get to. And if you then follow that up with a second S-curve, you will have essentially made a type of bell curve across the board, to sort of maneuver yourself on your ships in such a way that they always have some zones that they can put that firepower into, and it's incredibly hard to counter for an opponent as well, because if you maneuver him that way, there's almost no getting into one of their good sides, essentially. I'm also not trying to say that you can't do any of this stuff with forward-facing weaponry. I mean, you can. They are easier to pilot. My first Orbat deep dives mentioned this already. If you had good similar weapon arcs, it does make piloting those ships a lot easier, don't get me wrong. But I'm hoping that with this little tip you can actually get some more out of your own ships. And if you've tried it during one of your battles, make sure to give a thumbs up if you thought it was a good move, and subscribe to the channel for future updates, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!